Okay everyone, it's 6 o'clock, so we'll get started. So I'll just officially open the May Ordinary Council meeting for the town of Bassendean. Nyala Karij Nijabunjabal, Wanchak Nuna Bunja, Nyala Nini. So I just recognise that our town was founded on the lands of the Wajak Noongar people, always was and always will be. On the weekend we had a really wonderful citizenship ceremony where we welcomed new Australians into our community who have chosen the town of Bassendean as their home, and it was really fantastic to have Gina Williams and House come and perform for us as traditional owners of this land. So it was just a really fantastic way to welcome people to our community. I'd just like to bring people's attention to the fact that tonight's meeting is not only recorded but it's also live streamed, so any comments that people make will be made publicly available via the internet. And also just a quick reminder, if you haven't signed in yet, both for the council meeting record and also for the Safe WA app, that would be greatly appreciated if you could do that before you leave tonight. There are no announcements tonight, so we'll just go straight on to attendances, apologies and applications for leave. So we have all of our councillors in attendance. Are there any councillors who would like leave in the coming month? No? Great, so we'll move on. Declarations of interest, we've had a number from our CEO Peter Mabbs. They're in relation to items 12.3, 6.1 and 16.2, 16.1 and 16.2, which all relate to CEO recruitment and contracts. Are there any declarations of interest from councillors? Okay, excellent. So we'll move on to item 5. This is deputations. So this evening we have Mr. Jeff Dennis, who's the CEO of Swan Districts Football Club, to join us. Mr. Dennis, you're very welcome to come and speak to council. So Mr. Dennis is speaking on item 12.2, which is the Bassendean oval lighting. So you've got up to 10 minutes to present to council, and then councillors may wish to ask you questions on the subject. So welcome.
Thank you. Okay, so I might just start with just giving a bit of a background about Swan Districts Football Club and who we are and what we've transformed into over recent years. I believe there's far more value that we provide the town of Bassendean and the ratepayers and the broader community in what the football club has done in the past, because we're focused on social impact and increasing social value. And we've done that through a number of different strategies over a sustained period of time. So we've changed our purpose, so we're no longer just focused on winning premierships, developing AFL players. We're focused on building community and developing people. We have a vision to be a well-connected and community-engaged club that improves people's lives. We focus strongly on that, improving people's lives. What can we do to add value to our community, to be better integrated with our community, and as a consequence of that, become more relevant? So through that process, we're educating, energising and mobilising all of our people, from our staff, volunteers, players, members and supporters. So that's quite a large orbit that we're mobilising, and so together we can create an inclusive club and be better integrated with community. So we help strengthen community, develop people and create social value. We use football as a language, or let's extend that to sport. Sport's a language that we can just at least start a conversation. Most people understand the language of sport. Most people understand the language of Australian football in WA. Starts a conversation and develops into a relationship. The end result for us is social impact. How can we convert that to making some social impact? This now drives everything we do. People see us traditionally as a football club. We've been around 80, 90 years, but in the last 4 years it's totally transformed into what defines us is community engagement. And that's sustainable now because it's a new business model. So it's not just words on a paper, we're actually putting it into action. And this is a fundamental part of driving our business model moving forward. So it becomes sustainable, a sustainable change. So it's all about building social capital. While football is still critical about who we are, it's only become a vehicle to develop people, engage and contribute to community. There's a far bigger game at play now. And I recently gave a part of the education process with our members, gave a definition of social capital to them. It's the networks and relationships among people who live and work in a particular community, enabling that community to function effectively. Put simply, it's the programs and partners we create to help build a better place where we live. An example of that is creating a sense of self-worth, a reciprocal sense of belonging, with a sense of responsibility between marginalised people and their communities. In turn, this improves personal well-being, reduces crime and increases productivity of the community. For example, for our particular facility, 4 or 5 years ago, we were regularly broken into. In the last 3 years, there's been no break-in at all. So it's changed how we've been received within the community that we belong. And that's taken a lot of work to achieve that. But it's not limited to football too, so we use broadly sport. And so we're investing heavily in our Waffle Women's program. We've built a new change rooms dedicated to Waffle Women's, $210,000. We've also in the process of starting a basketball club, another opportunity to connect with the community. We're starting a wheelchair football team this season. We're also starting a walking football and walking basketball teams, so we can connect with seniors to address issues of isolation and loneliness. And next season we'll have a culturally and linguistically diverse male and female teams, and also an all-ability team in the amateur football league. That's not about getting an A-grade team. It's not about winning premierships in the amateurs. It's about another vehicle to connect with community and extend that conversation. So sport helps us create connection. It starts conversation, but it's the relationship after that which makes a difference to us. And it also makes a difference to our business model. Our community engagement programs aren't defined by our boundaries. Yes, our boundaries are quite locked in regarding talent development and which talent we can recruit, which talent we can't, but that's not our community. Our community is far broader than that. Our community is whoever wants to belong to our programs that we run. So it's the relevance of the programs that connect with those people. And those key people can live in Ellenbrook, they could live in High Wycombe, they could live in Joondalup, or they can live in Bunbury or Pilbara. But they're not defined by a geographic region. And the benefit we've got by broadening that reach and including more people is we can attract more funding partners to actually help us deliver those programs. If we were focused on a very narrow community just within the boundary of the town of Bassendean, it makes it very difficult to make that sustainable. And to do an initiative that we're doing out here, which is so innovative and really pioneering the future of West Australian sport, we need to make it sustainable. Otherwise it's just not going to last, and we'll end up being just words on a piece of paper. So some of the examples of some of the outreach programs that we are currently running: we provide food, clothing and services for Still Blue Oval for the homeless people every Wednesday. We partner with Orange Sky, Street Friends, Indigo Junction and Midlands. We run weekly school fitness programs in schools, including Ashfield Primary School. We provide inclusion programs in partnership with Seal Jackson Secondary College and other education support schools, Durham Road. We deliver young people at risk programs in partnership with local community not-for-profits and many high schools, including Kiara College. We provide mental health programs to over 200 players, and we're exploring ways that we can integrate those programs into our community outreach programs, so we can again find another touch point. We have around 200 people with challenges, physical challenges, and the carers attend the club 3 times a week for discos and karaoke's. We've got our annual Count Me In game this weekend, which is a big event in our calendar. We provide weekly cultural education programs for young Aboriginal people. We're providing work experience, job readiness training and employment opportunities for program participants, including Aboriginal people and also people with physical challenges. We have a Swan School Ambassador program, providing a point of contact to connect with our local school communities to promote our community outreach programs. So another way of connecting to local kids. And we're pioneering a 12-week weekly Aussie Fit pilot program. Started off a couple of weeks ago. We're piloting it with Curtin University, providing a theory, activity and exercise program for males that have had a cardiovascular event and a high BMI. Something again that other sporting clubs don't do, and something that we're reaching out to, another way to connect. We now have a volunteer coordinator overseeing our volunteer programs in preparation for launching into the seniors space to address isolation and loneliness. We've recently launched our 3rd reconciliation action plan, which includes dual naming of Still Blue Oval facilities, and this weekend or this Thursday at our Reconciliation Week breakfast, we'll have Ken Wyatt announce the name of the city end of the oval being the Boorloo end and the Derbyl-Yerrigan end being the Swan River end. And we also are looking to develop further into LGBTQIA inclusion with a program we're developing and a subcommittee we're developing and ready for 2022. We already have community subcommittees in relation to people with disability, in relation to Aboriginals, and in relation to young people at risk. We also use our Waffle and also our Waffle W games to provide another engagement point for our communities. We have our Swans Play Zone, which is very well received by many locals. We also have a sensory tent for those feeling overwhelmed and need a safe place to rest and reset, which has been very well received. And again, it cements that philosophy of inclusion, of welcoming people down in Steelcliff Oval. We have regular all ability games. We've got another one this weekend between Kingsley, and I think it's Willerton. We have our junior football club games on our Waffle and Waffle W home games. We also have our NAIDOC, Anzac, Count Me In, our father and son match days as well. So while Bassendean Oval is a regional facility, it's the football centre for the eastern suburbs and will always be the main football centre for the broader eastern suburbs. Our club not only serves the local town of Bassendean community, which almost 20% of our members reside in, but we also bring many people into the town to support local businesses, and we do that on a regular basis. We would like the town not to see this purely in relation to the lights, which I believe you've already made a decision, but in relation to the lights as just purely a financial transaction. We would like to see as a partnership, the town's helping the club fulfil our requirement in relation to building community, developing people. In return, we're providing we believe, a whole lot of in-kind in relation to community building and social impact. We believe there's not only a lot we're doing, we believe there's a lot more we can do. And in growing a partnership and a relationship with the town, it might not be cash that helps us, it might just be helping us unlock future funds from state government bodies or future funds from corporate bodies, which helps us build that sustainable model that helps us deliver more programs within the local community here. Again, not ring-fenced to Bassendean, broadly speaking, but it helps us provide the feet on the ground to provide more to what we're doing in this local facility, this local area.
Thanks, Jeff. I might give councillors a chance to ask you some questions. I appreciate you being here tonight. Just before we do, I'm just a little uncertain as to what you are seeking council to support tonight. You said something about the lighting, but then you said you're seeking more of a partnership. So.
No, I think this is a partnership. No, I'm not seeking anything in any cash or any financial contribution or anything in relation to partnership. I'm thinking that that a partnership can be in relation to helping us further develop our community outreach programs, and that might be helping us through that partnership unlock state government funds or other corporate funds to help us provide more fuel to deliver more programs.
Okay.
So that's not what I'm requesting. I'm just suggesting that could be an option for us to explore further down the track.
Sure.
But as what's been tabled is clearly the lighting.
Right. Okay. And the your position is the one-third proposal.
As per the
Okay.
That's right.
Great. Councillors, are there any questions for Mr. Dennis? Yes, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Worship, and thanks for the deputation, and thanks also for the work that you've done since becoming the CEO of Swans in transforming it from not just a waffle club but into a hub for the community. As you say, I've seen all of those changes that you described and welcomed them, but what we have before us tonight is consideration of a request for a CSRFF grant for lighting. So in the officer's report we've got before us, there's an estimate here to say that it would cost about $780,000 including design. I have done some other research around. City of Swan in 2019 said it would be $350,000 for the equivalent level of lighting. Have you done, or has the club done its own research on what a fair market price for such lighting would be to get it up to the 100 lights?
And we have with the WA Football Commission.
Yep.
And they concur with those figures that come from the town staff as well. So around that figure.
So it sounds like there's been
For the 100 lux, with the facilities, or obviously to expand it further down the track.
Okay, so all of the poles would be wired to a higher amount, and at some future point you could add extra
Correct.
lights.
Up to a maximum of 200 lux.
Okay, just a supplemental question if I could. A few years ago the town improved the lighting at Jubilee Reserve where the amateurs and the junior football club plays. As a part of the quotation process, the lighting companies provided a lighting design for free as a part of the quotation process. So I'm just seeking to understand the need for $30,000 for design if it's a standard practice.
That's not come from me. I think it's come from your town staff. The $30,000. So what we're just putting on the table is the 1/3 contribution, which will go then to state government to try and receive the approval for that additional funding, and then some work will be done in relation to the plan.
Okay, thank you.
Like Councillor Wilson, I appreciate the efforts that you're making to embed social value into the club, and there have been a lot of changes in the last few years, and that's greatly appreciated. I know that our community really values the club. The town, our community and our ratepayers in particular clearly support the club. I'm not sure if people are aware, but about $1 out of every 40 rates dollars that we collect currently go to maintaining the Oval at Bassendean. And given that there's limited access to members of the community to use that facility, that demonstrates a lot of support for the club. And then of course there are other things like scoreboards and fences and so on that the town has funded over the years. One of the comments that you just made was around the broadness of your community, and I'm very aware that even though you're in the town of Bassendean, we represent a very small part of the community that you serve that extends into the City of Swan, Shire of Mundaring, Pilbara, beyond, which is great, but a lot of that burden to support the club financially falls on our very small rates base. So for example, a $250,000 contribution from town of Bassendean ratepayers is equivalent to a 2.5% increase in rates for every single member of our community. So although the club's doing great things, I'm also aware that our role is to make the best decisions, or decisions in the best interests of our community, which is our ratepayers. I'm just wondering, given your comments about broadness providing opportunities to attract different sources of funding, whether you have sought other avenues to contribute to the lighting so that it doesn't just fall on the ratepayers of Bassendean?
They're just not available for us because of the locality of where the lights are and where the oval is. So all the other councils obviously aren't going to spend any money here. So then it gets down to corporates, and corporates aren't really into spending money into infrastructure. It's going to be where we're unlocking their funds is into our community programs. So it really gets down to the locality of the venue, which has always been a challenge for us, and collectively, both the town and ourselves as well, given the fact of the size of the town. We understand that.
Yeah, and acknowledging that we have a lot of ratepayers who are struggling, and we do try and minimise the rates burden on them. I'm aware, I had a look at your financial statements from last year, and there was a comment in there that last year was quite good to the club and that you returned a strong profit, and I think it was just over $900,000 surplus that the club had. I'm just wondering whether there was any consideration of the club contributing more to the lighting than the 1/3.
So let's just be clear about the 900,000. Out of that is the $210,000, which is built which is the asset, which has built the change room. So there all of a sudden that drops it down to $700,000, and a lot of that is just a one-off funding in relation to JobKeep and the rest. And what that's enabled us to do is to build enough cash reserves to ensure that we've got a bit of a backing, because it was very skinny there for many, many years, the way the club has been run in the past. And so what we've managed to do is to build up enough cash reserves to give us a little bit of a stronger balance sheet, which you can understand any business needs to have a reasonably strong balance sheet, because otherwise you're suspect to external shocks in the system that you may not be from what you've done, but it's enough to close the doors. And so what we've managed to do is to ensure that we've got enough, not overly strong, but enough cash reserves to protect ourselves moving forward. And that's also allowed us to contribute a third to this as well, which is $260,000, which will move from our balance sheet onto the town's balance sheet, clearly. So it's not as if we're not putting anything into it, putting quite a sizable amount, and there still is a sizable amount for us, the size of the club at the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Hamilton, a question, and then back to you, Councillor Wilson.
Like everyone else here, I thank you for your time coming tonight. It's appreciated. I'm curious about the secondary stage of improving the lighting to 200 lux, because clearly that will entail additional expenditure as well sometime down the track. So, as with any infrastructure program, if you do works all in one hit, you tend to actually minimise your expenditure. Could you explain to me why you're looking at a staged process of 100 lux, then a couple of years down the track, 200 lux? Just, I don't understand that.
Because my understanding is with the state government funding, grant funding, they would only go to 100 lux. That's my understanding. And also, it would be, the plan would be that the additional cost to take it to 200 would be our cost, and that we would then work with the AFL to try and unlock funding from the AFL to try and increase it from 100 to 200 lux.
Okay.
So it wouldn't be any extra cost burden on the town at all. It would be just enough to get that initial grant, which is largely the infrastructure, which is the poles and all the electricity, and enough luminaries to get it to 100 lux.
So, a supplementary question. Given that the draft town centre master plans are going out for community consultation in several weeks, and part of that has a proposal for reorientation of the oval itself, how do you see that as being an impediment to actually getting this project up in this next year? And the reason I ask that is because I did ask our staff last week at the briefing, given that process of the town centre master plan and the orientation of the oval, which obviously would affect any potential lighting plan, what sort of timeline would be reasonable for a plan to be created? And I was told around about 12 months. So my question to you is that what you perceive as being an appropriate time for the planning, rather than the actual infrastructure?
I don't see the issue in relation to the realignment of the oval, because my understanding from looking at the plans, we're only going to move it about 5 metres from east to west. So the suggestion I put through to town management is that we would then construct the poles where the new location will be, so they don't have to be relocated or moved anywhere else. So that means the new poles will go into where the town centre master plan will have the oval being positioned.
Okay, so before Councillor Wilson asks another question, did any other councillors? Councillor Quinton?
Hey Jeff.
Hi.
How's the season going?
Not bad.
You have talked a lot about, and I think it's amazing what the club's doing, particularly around inclusion and mental health, as you know, which is a strong passion of mine, in terms of your social capital and your social responsibility. Specifically, can you help me understand how the lights will enable our community, will bring our community into the oval? And secondary to that is there's a big barrier between our community and the oval, and that's the fence. This is a very contentious issue, and I know that there's been conversations over the years around how more of our people within the community can use the space if there was a solution to the fence issues. So, two-part question. We spend $250,000 on lights. What is that giving specifically to our community, and what opportunities are there around giving people more access to the oval?
Well, in answer to the first question, the improved lighting, what it will do is increase the capacity of the venue, so we can use the oval more often and for other uses. So that's not, we already use it for a maximum. We can use it for our players, Waffle and Waffle W. It's all the extraneous uses we can use with all the community programs. So what that also does is just help us further develop our community outreach strategies by more access to the facility, and that might be, and it might not be directly in relation to the lights in the oval, but we're keen to explore 3-on-3 night fields in relation to basketball in our car park. So that might be putting up a makeshift court, which we can get access through from Basketball WA, and inviting kids to come along, and they play a competition into our on that makeshift court in our car park. So it's another way of extending our programs to ensure that we have more outreach using both the oval space and whatever space we've got around the precinct. So we see that as a benefit of not only further integration within the community, developing our community programs, but also bringing more people into the town. So bringing more business for local businesses. And we feel that we already provide a reasonable amount for that. We get good feedback from all the shops within the Bassendean shopping centre that they look forward to when we start our season. They mark out when all their games are, put an extra staff, so they see a real benefit for that. We believe we can enhance that even more, so if we can bring more people and increase the capacity of the venue.
And the fence, is there an opportunity would the fences be open at night time if the lights are on? If there's training on at night time, can the community come in? Is there opportunity for the fences to come on at night time without training on that kind of stuff?
The community's always welcome through that oval. We don't lock any, and we go at pains to keep everything unlocked. I know there's been problems in the past, and I'm in regular conversations with some ratepayers every time someone's inadvertently locked a gate to ensure that we open up straight away. And so that's very, very important to us to ensure that it is seen as a public open space. The old fences are where the old fences are at the moment. It's a case of how do we provide further access. I mean, there are gates there are fences that are for car park vehicles access. They can be opened up, so people can still have access into the venue. They've just got to come through smaller areas to get into the access. They're not doing that now. Now, is that because there is a broader fence or fence around the oval, or is it because they just don't know where those access points are to get? And they don't know that they have access to go in there. Because we would welcome them to come, because it underpins what we are as this community engagement, this community vehicle that we are. We want people to be better connected to our club. We don't want to be locking people out. It's the last thing we want to be doing. It doesn't make sense without all the programs we run. But it's a case of the physical barrier, how we best address that. And that might be the case of when the new venues, if it's built at some stage, it might be the case of some of those fences, we have opportunities to collapse certain parts of them where those gaps or those entry points can be more regular, but they're easy enough to collapse back into again when we need them for our match days. Because that's still a significant source of revenue for us. And what we've been focusing on, instead of focusing on providing everything free of charge for people, we've been focusing on adding value to our match days. So people see a value of paying $15, and that's why we spend a whole heap of money and resources on our Swans Play Zone and all of our activation, all of our giveaways we give out. So when people come to a game, they believe that they walk home, that they leave the game feeling that that's value for money.
And I'm just wondering, with all of these extra events and traffic and people utilising the oval, how the turf is going to manage. Because I think we have an issue already with the nematodes. So it's not really an opportunity for us to have any more big events, because we've often talked about having another big day out and things like that, but those things aren't possible because we need to maintain the oval for the football season. Is that correct?
No, there's still 4 or 5 months in the off season. There's still a whole. I mean, we only use it. We use it for more than that, but during the off season, there's certain periods of time that there's not a large use, especially weekends. So weekends for 6 months of the year, it's not being used. So there's ways around that. Should the town have those opportunities to bring those events there, we would welcome that. That would be tremendous.
And just one last question: have you approached the state government for funding?
Well, this part of this process is approaching the state government.
CSRFF is federal or
State.
state?
State.
Okay,
State.
thank
So,
you.
yeah.
Councillor Ganja?
Thank you very much. I actually just want to get back to the lights. I've been pursuing this for quite a number of years. Currently, I think on a good night, when all the lights are on and actually facing the oval, because they flip around, I think we're at a maximum of 20 lux, which is very much subpar. I've read reports where it's obviously now in danger of injuring players. This is professional sport, fantastic to have it in the town. How sustainable is it with the current lights at their current condition?
Well, it's not, and I've put into my report, which was tabled with you guys at your briefing session, as I understand, we frequently and regularly get concerns from our doctors and medical staff about the safety of the venue. And yeah, that's been, for us, the same period of time, for a number of years, that it's been subpar. Phil and the guys have worked really hard over in recent weeks to address all the issues, and the lights have looked the best they've looked for a long time. Last weekend when we had a Channel 7 TV game. But the issue with safety is a real concern for us.
Yeah.
Safety of the
So
players.
last week, I'm
So
not sure if you.
Councillor Ganja, just to correct, you mentioned 20 lux, just in the report it's saying 30 lux, so just so that we're all talking the same
Okay,
language.
well, I think that's maybe
Yeah.
when 30 lux is when all the lights are facing the oval. Maybe when they flip around, it goes to 20. I think it was an answer that I got at a previous council meeting. I'll research it. So last week, I asked the question about who is liable should somebody be injured. The staff came back that the Swansea Football Club would be liable for your own players. I asked then that if the town's unwilling to support the lights, staff or the inclination was Swans should look elsewhere for training. Has that been a prospect
Councillor
you've
Ganja,
looked
I'm
at?
not sure that was
No,
what
it's
your
not.
interpretation of the staff's response was. They did not state that.
Okay, well, I'm happy for you to look at the recording again. Have you sought other? I'll just ask a different question. Have you sought other venues for training due to the standard of the lights?
Not at the moment. We've got a meeting with City of Swan shortly, and that's broadly speaking about facilities, not only football but basketball as well. So no, we haven't addressed any of those issues yet. But we're really focused on trying to sort this, find a solution.
Yep, thank you.
And we genuinely feel that the benefit we can provide the town is on our social outreach, and we're leaving no stone unturned. We're doing an enormous amount of work in that space, and we see that there's providing some services that the town will find it difficult to provide themselves, and that's a service we can pick up.
Okay, we probably need to keep moving. You had one more question, Councillor Wilson, and then we'll finish up.
I did, thank you, Your Worship. I'll keep it short. As you mentioned, there's some discussion about possible realignments, and that might tie into investments to replace the club facilities and the rest of it. I know our neighbours in East Fremantle recently got $20 million from the state government to upgrade their facility. It would be nice to think that the state government would do the same for the people of Bassendean. However, until we secure that commitment, have you given any thought to retrofitting the existing light poles to the 100 lux standard and done any costings on that, just until we've got certainty about the alignment?
No, we haven't, because as we understand, the current light poles are just non-compliant. So they're 30 odd years old, 30, 40 years old, and they're just not compliant. So yeah, so we haven't addressed that issue at the moment. This is what we've been pursuing, because we believe this is the right way to do it, and ensure that it's again, it's an asset that will sit on the town's balance sheet that we're prepared to contribute towards. We understand the state government would be prepared to contribute towards it. It just goes with the town.
My apologies, Councillor Hamilton had indicated another question. So the final
be very
question,
quick.
Councillor Hamilton.
And I apologise for not knowing enough about football, but basically I was told last week that the games are actually daytime games and it's training that's done at night. Is that right?
It is, but there are some issues like the past weekend and we don't request TV broadcast games. We don't want TV broadcast games. We want people to come along to our game and to be part of our community. But sometimes Channel 7 and the Football Commission allocate our games to be
And you need
broadcast.
lights.
And well, we do when it's middle of winter and it gets dark quite early. So, and then last weekend we had 20 mils of rain, so it became quite dark, so it was quite an issue.
Okay, and my other question is, I know at the moment that you're possibly negotiating or liaising with our administration about the licence agreement. I don't really want to go into that because that's a private agreement, but clearly the lights are not included in that as it's more you use what's there rather than having upgraded lights. So I question whether you can continue liaising with the administration, because obviously there are things in that agreement where both parties could benefit from some renegotiation of some of the conditions. The other thing about the licence agreement, it goes for 7 months.
Kath, is there a question around the
Well,
licence
yes, 1st of September to the 31st of March is the licence agreement, am I correct? 7 months?
Well, no, the licence agreement for 12 months, but we have more access during those 7-month period.
See, I thought it was just 7 months, 1st of September to the 31st of March.
Councillor Hamilton, just reminding you that the licence agreement is a confidential attachment.
Oh, sorry, apologies. I'll leave it there. Apologies.
Thank you for indulging all of those questions, really appreciate it. And your item is one of the first on the agenda, so when we get to that point, you see the decision we made. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, councillors, so coming back to the agenda, item 6 is statements by members of the public. So this is the opportunity for anybody who would like to make a statement on any of the items on tonight's agenda to do so. So if that is you, I invite you to raise your hand and I'll bring you to, hold on a sec, Mr. Siddell. You can come to the microphone if you can state your name and your address and the item number that you're speaking to, and you have up to 3 minutes to address council. So welcome, Mr. Siddell.
Oh, thank you. It's Carol Sodell, 55 Broadway, Bassendean. Firstly, I think it'd be very good that the council actually put tree protection orders on the hotel trees, the 3 that are remaining. I feel we need to preserve our trees and I would like them to remain. On the issue of memorial chair or seats and trees, I think that's really good because I know there have been people who have passed away in the past and their family has wanted the town of Bassendean to, you know, they were prepared to pay for a memorial seat and have been rejected, and I figure that really some of these people were really well known within the community, and I think if the families are prepared to put the bill, well, I think we should actually let them do it. So, to give you an example, Ken Trevor's father, when he died, apparently Mr. Trevor's liked being down there at the Point Reserve, and the family wanted a chair down there, and that was rejected. So I think people like Ken Travers would be delighted to see that happen. On the possible road closures, if that's what you want to call it, at the shopping centre, I don't know whether this is being discussed tonight or not, but I really figure that I would like to see it deferred. I think it's for this council to proceed to say it's okay. I feel we are setting a precedent for not just for this local government here, but for other local governments. And I'd like to give you an example where, I'm not saying I'm going to do it, but you know, to be frank with you, I could say, well look, I would like my road reserve out the front of my house and have that reserve extended so I've got more land for the future, and that's not going to get off the ground. So I see any road closures where there could be benefits for a shopping centre down the track, because you've got to value the fact that parking, especially in the eastern states, is a valued commodity. And if you go to shopping centres in the eastern states, you get charged for parking at shopping centres. And so I would see any parking area at the shopping centre was then put into private hands is detrimental to parking, but also I figure for any planning in the future for main roads, if they want to widen any roads, Guildford Road, West Road, you name it, and we've sold off our road reserve, which is actually owned by the state government. I feel we have a moral obligation to say no. So thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Adair. Well timed. You had 2 seconds left. Well done.
I've got to go, so sorry about that.
Any further statements? Okay, so we'll move on to item 7, which is questions from members of the public. So again, this is the opportunity to ask any questions that relate to the business of the local government. So once again, if you could indicate by raising your hand and come to the microphone. Thank you for being here, ladies. Any questions? Okay, thank you everyone. We'll move on then. There's no petitions tonight, so item 9 is confirmation of minutes. So 9.1A is that the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on the 27th of April be received. Is there a mover? Councillor Barty, and a seconder, Councillor McWilliam. Anybody against? That's carried. And 9.1B that they're confirmed as a true record. Is there a mover? Councillor McWilliam, seconded Councillor Barty. Is there anybody against? So that is carried. Councillor Hamilton, you look like you wanted to ask something.
Yes, I'm a bit late in asking. I found something in the quarterly report which said that I moved an item which I am sure I didn't move.
Okay.
And so that would be in the, and I'm sorry, I should have actually been on to that and sent an email to
So
say.
the quarterly report's in tonight's agenda.
Yes, I know, but it references me moving the community awards, which would have been these minutes that we're approving, and I didn't move that.
Okay, well maybe we could.
It's only a minor thing. I just, so apologies for that. I should have sent the email this afternoon when I thought of it.
All right, thank you. I think it's been noted. Item 10 is business deferred, of which there is none. So item 11 is the external committee reports. So we have the minutes of the Walga East Metro Zone meeting from April and the Walga State Council meeting from May. Is there a mover for those minutes to be noted? Councillor Wilson, seconded Councillor Quinton. Is there anybody against? That is carried. So councillors, coming to item 12, which is the reports. At the moment I have the following reports coming out of en bloc. 12.2, 12.3, 12.4, 12.6, 12.10, 12.11, 12.12, 12.13, 16.1 and 16.2. Are there any others that councillors would like?
12.14.
12.14, the quarterly report. Anything further, councillors? Okay, in that case we have a mover for the remainder to be carried on block. Councillor Wilson moved, seconded by Councillor Barty. Is there anyone against? That's carried. So we'll go to item 12.2, which is the Bassendean oval lighting. Firstly, are there any questions for the staff? Councillor Gangel?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just seeking clarification on a comment that you made during the deputation.
Yep.
You referred to 250,000 being the equivalent of 2.5% rate increase to the ratepayers.
Yep.
I'm just wondering, the business as usual allocation that we have for trees and maintenance, would that be the equivalent of a 10% rate rise each year?
Business as usual.
One moment, please. I believe, just in relation to the first question, the things in relation to the small districts loss is probably more akin to 2%. 1% rate rise in the town is roughly equal to $135,000. So we'll just get the calculator out. It's probably around about 7 to 8%.
Thank you.
But just to clarify, that is business as usual, so that's maintaining all of the street trees we currently have, and the additional trees that would be potentially funded in each other budget would be a smaller percentage of that amount.
Yes, the additional tree purchases, I think in this year's budget from memory, around about $378,000. So that would represent roughly around 3%.
Thank you.
Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Worship. So just a question on the $30,000 design component. I'm just seeking to understand how staff have arrived at that figure and what the science is behind it.
Yes, through the mayor. That's a general allocation that would be required to undertake the design. I think undertaking the design is important from my perspective in the relocation of the playing surface, but also to ascertain if we need to make any additional upgrades to the power coming in to the facility. There are issues with that. There are known issues with that, and also the obtrusive lighting that will generate from upping the lighting to the 100 lux. It will be tricky to design it to cater for Guildford Road, West Road, and the surrounding residents. And my understanding of engaging with the lighting designers is that that's the most critical component of the lighting design, is the obtrusive lighting.
Thank you. Councillor Hamilton.
I'd like to ask a question, but I'd also mention I've got a motion, foreshadowed motion as well. So, the report indicates the potential to do 100 lux and then move up to 200 lux, which we've heard from deputation that the club would pay for the upgrade to 200 lux. But clearly the poles that need to be installed are perhaps wider for 200 lux. Am I correct in that assumption?
Through the chair, that's correct, Councillor.
Okay, so when you do this lighting, and if you do this lighting design, would there be potential to actually also scope out the costing of upgrading to 200 lux? And my interest in that relates to the ambitions of the club, and if you are also looking at overflow of lighting, I'm assuming that that will come into play with the planning. So my question is, how extensive will the planning be in respect to the future ambitions of going up to 200 lux?
Thanks for that. Through the chair, the intention is to design the lighting to enable the lighting to be upgraded to 200 lux in the future. That essentially means that the poles need to be higher. The lighting design will take that into consideration. The lighting design needs to take that into consideration to make sure the obtrusive lighting is not detrimental to Guildford Road and the surrounding residents. So that's an important part of the design, but that's the intention, and the estimate of 750,000 is based on that approach.
Councillor Quinton.
Thank you. Just following on from that, what's the normal process around community consultation for this obtrusive lighting for residents that live around an oval?
Yes, thanks for that. Through the chair, look, there are standards that we have to work to. So the lighting design will meet those standards. If it was to go ahead, then the lighting design will need to meet those standards. If it meets those standards, there won't be any issues from main roads. There won't be any issues from the main roads department, and there shouldn't be any comeback on that. That's not to say that residents won't raise it as a concern, but it will be designed to the latest standards, and there'll be certain times that the lights will have to be turned off by. You know, that probably won't be able to go on beyond 10 o'clock or something like that.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Worship. So under the Community Sport and Recreations Facilities Fund guidelines, there's a capacity for contribution to be in kind as well as cash, and that a 33.3% contribution from the town of Bassendean could be accounted for as in-kind support. Have the staff looked at any possibilities for in-kind contributions towards the design or the location of wiring or anything like that to contribute to the cost in lieu of cash?
Through you, Madam Mayor. The report for Council tonight is simply responding to the request from the club, and that request from the club is for a financial contribution. So the short answer in response to Councillor's question is no, that the report's being constructed and the matter's been assessed based on the club's approach to town, which was simply for a financial contribution.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor McWilliam.
You might recall I raised this as an issue last week, talking about the turf that is infested with these nematodes all over the metropolitan area as a result of turf providers not managing perhaps their product. I also noticed that there's mention of the playing surface on the turf in the deputation, or in the the officer's report. But in the deputation, Mr. Dennis has suggested that it might be possible for the town to hand over management of the turf to Swan Districts. What I'm really interested to know is, and I think we're all a bit interested to know, what is the actual size and weight of the town's investment in Swan Districts Football Club at the Oval grounds, etc. So what is the cost of turf management at Swan Districts Football Oval each year, please?
Through you, Madam Mayor, we don't have those numbers on hand. I suppose I could broadly comment that the town's investment in the site, when all factors including turf are included, is significant, particularly for a town of our size. If councillors wish to have a better handle on the specific expenditure on the various elements, perhaps they can be provided separately to councillors.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, so we need a motion. I know we've got two. Councillor Hamilton has one, and a second one. So Councillor Hamilton, what are you proposing?
Okay, so I've got a proposal, an amendment. I shall read it out. That Council 1 includes an allocation of $30,000 in the draft 21-22 budget to fund up to 50% of the cost of designing upgraded lighting at the Bassendean Oval. 2, request town staff explore alternative opportunities for funding of upgraded lighting, including with WAFC. 3, defers any consideration of a budget allocation to fund the provision of upgraded lighting at the Bassendean Oval until the 22-23 budget. And 4, requests that the Chief Executive Officer continue to liaise with Swan Districts Football Club regarding a revised agreement for the club's use of Bassendean Oval.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. I'm just wondering, given the other motion that has been circulated, whether the wording of some of those points better suits your purpose. So, for example, point 2 on the other page, which is a similar point to what you have for point 2, but which reads, encourages Swan Districts Football Club and the WA Football Commission to explore other funding options to upgrade the lighting at the Bassendean Oval so as to reduce the reliance on the town's ratepayers to part fund the requested upgrades.
I'm not adverse to that. What I'm looking for is the best outcome.
Yep.
And
so
taking on...
Yes or no, Councillor Hamilton? It's your motion?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so is everyone clear on the motion that Councillor Hamilton is proposing?
So we're going with the second option on the second page?
No, just
she's,
point 2.
She's including point 2 from the second page on as point 2 in her motion.
So point 2 on the second page replaces point 2 on the first.
Okay, so Councillor Hamilton has moved her motion. Is there a seconder for her motion? Councillor Quinton. I imagine there will be debate. So Councillor Hamilton, would you like to begin?
Thank you, everyone. Being aware that it is a tight financial budget, I am seeking to find a solution. Now, some of the information provided by the staff last week indicated that there would be a a certain time period required to do the planning. Further questions tonight indicated that the planning needs to be quite detailed. It needs to cover a whole range of issues so that we don't have detrimental effects on the neighbouring properties with overflow of lighting, etc. So I do think that the planning is really vital and needs to be perfect. During that planning process, it will become more clear the costings required to proceed with the actual infrastructure. Working in tandem with all this is the draft town centre master plan, which has yet to go out to full community consultation. So that community consultation will reaffirm or confirm some of the aspects of the oval development that may be acceptable to the community. Part of that includes the oval realignment. I've heard the commentary that the lighting poles will be put in the position of the new alignment, but I can't see how that can be confirmed until the community consultation is concluded. So with all these timelines, to me it seems reasonable to think that the planning will take at least 6 to 9 months. Now, if we get started on this, then by the next budget cycle we will be ready to actually look at the infrastructure, and we will have a more firm idea of what the infrastructure will cost, including the potential of going up to 200 lux. It also gives the football club and the town time to approach different entities like the state government about the potential of actually increasing and contributing more to the infrastructure. Whether that could mean the infrastructure is all done in one hit, or whether it's a 2-stage project, I don't know. That comes back to the negotiations that come into play between the different parties. But my motion is an attempt to find a way forward that will assist the club in some surety that we are at least going into the planning stage, that will assist the town in a tight budget year to actually do some work but not commit to infrastructure at this point in time, because clearly it's a significant amount of money for the town. We have been in a period of COVID where we have not benefited from some of the things that have been provided to other entities. I don't believe JobKeeper was available to local governments. So local governments, and like even our childcare, there were things where we were subsidising for very long periods.
There, Councillor Hamilton.
So I would ask councillors to support this.
Thank you, Councillor Quinton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There is absolutely no denying that the Swan Districts Football Club are wonderful contributors to our community. There is no denying it. Jeff Tennis sat here and outlaid some of the wonderful programs, the inclusive programs, homelessness programs, getting children into sport, and they're wonderful, wonderful residents of our town. But as Councillor Hamilton has just outlined, we are not in a financial position right now to be outlaying $260,000 for something that is not a priority for the town. Just a reminder, we did not raise rates in the town last year. We raided our reserves in order to get through COVID, and we are now having to catch up on a lot of the things that we didn't pay for last year. In 2015, we spent $450,000 on a board, and would the staff just oblige me, how much do we spend per year on maintaining the oval?
Let's see if I could.
I think the staff said they didn't have those figures exactly on
Okay,
hand,
sorry.
but it was a significant amount.
It's a significant amount. So it's not as though the town is not already contributing to the oval. We are already doing our bit in kind and financially to make sure that the oval is an accessible and usable space for our community. I think this does strike a good balance. I am not against the town contributing money for lighting, but it has to be down the track when we can afford it. We can't afford it right now. We just can't afford it right now. Councillor Gangel raised the issue about trees, and I'm sure he's going to raise it in his debate, but we are in a climate crisis. We have a responsibility to make sure that we are planting as many trees as possible. Our tree canopy in this town is 14%. I have no problem with us spending $300,000 a year on trees. Those trees are going to last decades, and they are going to cool our suburbs for every single resident on every single street in this community. So we have to make decisions based on what is good for the whole community, and I think this does strike a good balance. It doesn't mean that we won't fund the lighting, it just means it has to go down the track when we can afford it.
Thank you, Councillor Quinton. Did you have a question, Councillor Wilson?
No, just
Speaking
indicate
against?
please.
Yes, you're welcome to speak.
Thank you, Worship. I don't disagree with any of the points raised by Councillors Hamilton or Quinton in their contributions. I'm speaking against this motion only because I would foreshadow that should the motion be lost, I would intend to move the other alternative motion listed on the other page before councillors. The only point of difference that I have is that I have difficulty with the idea of contributing $30,000 to lighting design when there's still so many unanswered questions. So we don't know yet what the alignment of the oval will be. We don't know yet how long that will take. We don't know yet whether the state government will make a $20 million contribution to our community, just like they made to East Fremantle's community during an election campaign. A commitment they made my way with no requirement for housing on their sporting facility. So we heard during the deputation that the state government has certain rules, but it seems those rules are entirely flexible and the state government wishes them to be. And when it comes time to an election, they can find $20 million for the community of East Fremantle, and good for them. I would like to think that they would do the same for us as well. So to the extent that this motion says that we should spend $30,000 on a lighting design before we yet know what the alignment is going to be, I think maybe that's premature. So I oppose this motion moved by Councillor Quinton and Councillors Hamilton and Quinton, and would implore councillors to consider instead the motion, the other alternative motion.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Are there any speakers for the motion? Against the motion? Councillor Ganger?
Thank you, Your Worship. Right, when you look at a budget, you look at urgency in the budget. What we have heard, and we know for a great number of years, these lights are defunct. They are non-compliant. They're nowhere near the grade that is required for the safety of our young athletes that use that reserve, and any other person using the reserve as well. That's what we know. That's what you look at when you look at a budget. What is the primary focus and number one priority? And that must be, each and every time, safety for our community. Upgrading these lights will actually ensure that. Also, further to that, I'm looking for balance. That's all I'm looking for. We heard that this would be about 2%, but yet business as usual, year in, year out, for trees and trees maintenance is somewhere between 7 and 8% with this council. And that goes up each year because the maintenance goes up. We need to find a balance somewhere, so therefore urgent and critical facilities such as lighting, and we should absolutely, number one, paramount, look at how we can utilise our reserves for the best and most widely used need as our community, and putting facilities such as lighting, upgrading the lighting to a usable capacity is absolutely number one. It is shameful that the Midvale Junior Football Club has 100 lux lighting, and the Swan Districts Football Club, who brings in a great deal of people into our town, is one of the icons of our town and our suburb and our area, is there at best with 30 lux compared to the Midvale Junior Football Club. I urge councillors to find a balance. I urge councillors to look at the priority of this project. This project has been required for a number of years. It's not like it's the first time that's come presented to council. And I urge councillors to please find some balance. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ganger. Any other speakers? Councillor Hamilton, do you wish to speak again?
Thank you, councillors. Despite the debate from Councillor Gangel, I would suggest that this does provide a balance, because clearly the consultation on the town centre master plans will probably take a couple more months, and by providing some funds towards the planning, it will allow the lighting design to be created so that next year, in next year's budget, when we are in a better financial position, we can commit, well, a council, because there'll be new councillors potentially on a council at that point in time, may or may not commit to the infrastructure. I would suggest to Councillor Gangel that, you know, you can compare trees, but maintenance actually includes watering of all the town's trees. It's not just the new trees. So, you know, it's very difficult to actually say that 7% versus 3%. That's actually not quite correct. And this is a project which I believe there is some value in supporting improved lighting, but I also believe that we are coming out of a difficult financial period and that we need to actually be fairly mindful of the things that we can fund this year. So I believe we can fund the planning. I think the planning will set us in a better position to know the exact expenditure in the following year, and I think this is a way forward. So I would ask councillors to support this.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. So we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour of Councillor Hamilton's motions, we've got Councillor Quinton, Hamilton and McWilliam, so that is lost. Councillor Wilson, you had a motion you wish to move?
Thank you, Worship. Yes, the other alternative motion that was circulated with the three charts is the motion that I wish to move.
Would you like to read it for everyone's benefit?
Yes, the council, point 1, defers any consideration of a budget allocation to contribute to funding the design or capital works for upgraded lighting at the Bassendean Oval until the 2022-2023 budget following the completion of the Town Centre Master Plan and the potential oval realignment has been finalised. 2, encourages the Swan Districts Football Club and the West Australian Football Commission to explore other funding options to upgrade the lighting at the Bassendean Oval so as to reduce the reliance on the town's ratepayers to part fund the requested upgrades. And 3, requests that the CEO, that is of our town, continue to liaise with the Swan Districts Football Club regarding a revised agreement for the club's use of Bassendean Oval.
Okay, you've got that, Amy? Yes, thank you. Okay. Is there a seconder for Councillor Wilson's motion? Councillor McWilliams seconded. Are there people against? Would you like to speak, Councillor Wilson? Apologies.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's been a long day. I absolutely agree that there is a need for lighting that meets the required standard for the safety of the players and for the amenity of the ground and for the club. For me, this is a sequencing issue. If we're going to keep the alignment where it is, there's a very simple planning process in place, which is to map out what the lux lighting requirement is, see where you put the poles, install the poles. But
Councillor Wilson, can you address council, please?
indeed I am, Your Worship. If there, however, is the possibility that we're going to do a realignment, I hope that the state government provides some funding to our community, just as they did to the people of East Fremantle, then it will be a completely different design. All of the placement of the poles will be in a different place. We don't know yet where that would be. So whilst I accept there's urgency, whilst I accept there's a need for it, when we do the design is the critical factor for me. Councillor Gangel raised that the Midvale Junior Football Club has 100 lux lighting and excellent for them. What the Midvale Junior Football Club does not have, however, is $700,000 in its bank account. Yes, the club ran out of surplus. I'm not suggesting that that's how much money the Swan Districts Football Club has in its bank account, but we do know it ran out of surplus. Part of that surplus was a contribution from our ratepayers, which was to waive fees and charges last year. Part of that surplus was a contribution from our ratepayers. And our ratepayers need a bit of a buffer too. To put what is equivalent to, roughly for argument's sake, a 2% impost on our ratepayers to pay for these lights at a time when many people are still struggling, when unemployment is uncertain, it is a big ask. And I would like to think that we could get contributions from other sources and spend some time convincing the state government especially that it ought to make a proper contribution to this so that we don't have to raise rates at a time of historically low pay increases and instability in our community. So we have to balance up the needs for lights with the capacity of our community to pay with certainty, and at the moment I don't think we've got certainty about the alignment. Let's work out what the alignment is, get a plan that matches that. If it's not going to happen, if we can't get the $14 to $20 million that it would probably cost to do a fully upgraded facility at Bassendean Oval, then perhaps we have to accept that it stays where it is and we put lighting poles there, and we have that discussion once we know. But until then, let's go away and do our due diligence. Let's explore what capacity we have for in-kind contribution, and let's shore up our costs so they're not guesstimates.
Thank you. Did you have a question?
Question, yes. Thank you, Worship. I just want to seek clarification from the staff. Councillor Wilson mentioned, and he's mentioned a few times now, that potentially allocation of funding should be provided to the town for the lighting or the oval. My question is, can the staff advise if any ministers have been approached in relation to solely funding the oval or light redevelopment at the oval, and if so, who?
Thank you, Councillor Gangel. I can certainly confirm I've discussed this subject with our local member, but that has been the extent.
Thank you.
Councillor McWilliam, your opportunity to speak.
So yes, ma'am, thank you. Look, I think that there's not a person that lives in Bassendean that doesn't know Swan District's Football Club. I've known it for many more years than perhaps some, but we won't go into that right now. I think that what Councillor Wilson has moved in the motion is a middle path toward moving towards planning for the lighting. Given the last motion has failed, this is our way forward at this point in time. And I acknowledge that Swan Districts are attempting to accumulate reserves for expenses in the future. So is the town of Bassendean trying to recoup reserves now after weathering a difficult year last year. So, and this is something that is not, that this is common across all clubs and associations, that they have to actually have this kind of forward planning and contingency planning in place and funds available to get them through the difficult times that come up. So it's not been the history of lots of associations and sporting organisations and not-for-profits, etc., to actually do that kind of planning. It's, in the past it's more been about every year you go back to the Park Sport Recreation, as they were once upon a time, their heyday, you get another round of funding, and some of you get a lot more than others. But anyway, I think that this is worthwhile pursuing this motion at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McWilliam. Speakers against the motion? Councillor Gangel.
Thank you, Your Worship. Look, just in relation to the master plan and the oval realignment, in my mind, that's finding justifications for not doing something. The master plan and the oval realignment does not need to occur before you upgrade the lighting. I've been on council for a substantial period of time now, and I can safely say, I think, that it will be a long time coming before you actually see the oval actually realigned, if that is to occur in the future. I just also want to raise a point that has been raised in relation to funding and the state government providing us funding. Well, the state government in fact did provide us funding. It provided us funding and an allocation for a stadium at Ashfield. Off the top of my head, I think it was around $30 million. And this council, first thing it did was reject that stadium actually being placed in Ashfield. So when you reject a significant amount of money, it's not surprising that governments choose not to deal with you. So I think potentially when we start talking about why we're not getting funding, I think we need to look at our own actions in the past and why potentially some people would be shying away from the town. But again, I reiterate, these lightings are required. They are non-compliant currently. When you go through a budget, you should, absolutely first point of call, look at what is the level of urgency of things. And these lights are substantially putting players at risk. So regardless of what you think, whether or not it's a drain or unfair impost on the town, well, we have the Oval. We need to make sure we're able to have the infrastructure that maintains the Oval, and these lights are paramount to maintaining the Oval and also making sure we can utilise our reserves at the best possible function. So we can actually use the reserves in the evening, encourage people outside, encourage concerts coming to the town, encourage alternative events using our Oval, using our stations at Success Hill and Bassendean, bringing people into the town. These lights will have vastly bigger benefits than simply making sure we have a safe playing field and training field. These lights will also ensure we're able to broaden the use of this reserve, and that should be number one and paramount in our consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gangel. Can I just seek clarification from the staff? I understood from listening to the briefing last week that the level of lighting that's available at the moment does not prohibit us having events inside of the Oval. It would be adequate for the kind of events that Councillor Gangel is referring to?
Through you, Madam Mayor, that was a community function. Obviously, as you proceed up the hierarchy to ball sports and semi-professional ball sports, the lighting needs to be better. But certainly, the better the lighting, the greater the range of functionality. But the point that was made last week is that even with the lights as they are, there is at least some degree of functionality right now.
Great, thank you very much. Any other speakers? Councillor Wilson, did you wish to close debate?
Thank you, Worship. Just shortly, in response to points raised by Councillor Gangel in his impassioned speech, if it is as urgent as Councillor Gangel suggests, then the club is in a capacity to pay for it. If it's a case of player welfare, then the club is in a capacity to pay for it. Under the Community Sport and Recreations Facilities Fund guidelines, the club could contribute 1/3, as is currently being proposed in their request. The state government could contribute 1/3, as is currently being proposed in this request. And the other third can come from in-kind contributions. Earthworks as an in-kind contribution, electrical as an in-kind contribution from potentially sponsors, friends and supporters of the club. Those works can be done without a cash contribution from the town of Bassendean and from our ratepayers. For me, it goes down to the placement of the poles, and the placement of the poles is dependent on the orientation of the Oval. And while there is some possibility that we can fix the orientation of the Oval, then it makes sense to me at least that we would make a decision about new poles based on what the new orientation of the Oval would be. Do it once, do it properly, rather than upgrade the lights and then perhaps maybe move them at some later point, which would be throwing good money after bad. But to the extent that it is a player health and safety and welfare issue, I would encourage the club to continue to pursue the possibility of finding a 1/3 contribution from sponsors that could contribute to channels for wiring, electrical and all of those sorts of things. And I know there are some engineering companies that are loyal and proud sponsors of the club, so that is open to the club.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wilson. So we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour of Councillor Wilson's motion? Councillor Wilson, Councillor Quinton, Councillor McWilliam, Councillor McLennan, and against is Councillor Barty, Councillor Hamilton and Councillor Gangel, so that is carried. Thank you, everybody. Item 12.3 is the expression of interest for 1 Surrey Street. Are there questions, first of all, for the staff? Councillor Gangel?
Thank you, Worship. If I could I just get a run through of the timeline of what happens now with the recommendation? So my understanding is it's not final, but then we go out to further consultation. Is that what happens?
In terms of the process, I'll ask our Director Community Planning to advise on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The process, as you say, Councillor Gangel, is not finalised. If Council resolves as is contained in the officer report, under the Local Government Act there is a process. Because Council back in November decided not to run a public tender process, but rather an EOI process. There is still obligation under the Act that we need to satisfy. That would involve public consultation of any proposed disposition. So if council was to resolve tonight as recommended, that consultation would begin in early mid-June, I'd suggest. It would wrap up early mid-July, and staff may be in a position to bring that back to council via the August OCM.
Can I just ask, when this first came to council and the decision to put the expression of interest out was discussed, one of the things that a lot of community members were interested in was what protections there might be around the site in future. So if we were to dispose of it to the party that has been recommended, what could be put in place to enable those protections for the site in future? Are you able to provide some clarification on that for us, please?
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. Broadly, the main protections would be a deed of agreement, which I believe I referred to last November. That would be a legally binding contract between the town and the acquiring authority that would oblige them to do certain things in certain ways. That would be supported by a caveat lodged over the title to ensure that the new owner couldn't subsequently dispose of it to a third party. It still does require a leap of faith somewhat for council, because whilst the deed of agreement could oblige the new owner to do certain things, if that new owner defaulted on the requirements of the deed, it would place an obligation on the town to pursue that through the courts. So yes, there are protections in place, but it would require the town to actually elevate the matter to the courts.
Okay, thank you. And if council did agree to advertise this to the community, would the intention be to make those provisions clear in the consultation process?
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes, that would be the case.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Okay then, councillors, we've got a officer recommendation before us. Just bring your attention to the wording at the moment. If somebody does wish to move this, we would need to delete the first two lines. It would probably need to start with that council, proceed to advertise it as it's written. Does that make sense to everybody?
Repeat that.
Yeah. Okay. That council requests the Chief Executive Officer proceed to advertise the intended disposal to the organisation, to the party identified in the confidential attachment, as required under the Local Government Act 1995. So just clarifying what the wording of the motion would be. Is that a question or moving the motion?
Moving the motion.
Councillor Quinton has moved the motion. Is there a seconder? Councillor Wilson has seconded. Is there anybody against? Would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor Quinton?
Yes, thank you. All of us that have been on council in the past 4 years have a special place for Surrey Street in our hearts, and it will remain there until we're all dead and buried in the ground. And I know that there are many people in our community who feel equally the same about this beautiful building. I did read the submission from the Bassendean Historical Society, and I wholeheartedly agree with them when they say that this should stay in public hands. I agree with them.
Can I just remind councillors that the submissions are confidential?
Yes, thank you. I agree with the sentiments that I have heard from the Bassendean Historical Society before at the last November meeting, when they said that the Surrey Street should stay in government hands. I agree with them. I would love for this building to stay within local government, state government or federal government hands. I do. But it is costing us an enormous amount of money to maintain. The building is falling apart. It needs to be cared for by an organisation that has expertise as a museum and in any kind of historical sense. So this gives us a way forward to ensure that under this process we can keep the building as it is for community use, without it being such a burden on our finances to the town. I think this, when we go out for this EOI, I think this will give us an opportunity for the building to continue to be used as beautiful as it is and to stay in our community.
Thank you, Councillor Quinton. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Your Worship. Surrey Street has been quite a journey for the past 4 years. My voting record is very clear on this. I preferred the idea of having a revamped community centre at the back where potentially the infant health nurse would be able to move to, that it would be able to be enjoyed by families as a living building rather than as some kind of static museum to the past. But also I was on the losing side of that debate and those votes, so be it. We are here where we are. This seems now to be the most logical path forward, given the decisions the council has made, and for those reasons I support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Ganja?
Thank you, Your Worship. In relation to this, it is unfortunate. Surrey Street was ready to go and commence in 2017. We did have a substantial Lottery West line of $375,000. Unfortunately, those works did not proceed and council decided to take an alternative route, and we've currently ended up where we are tonight. I haven't supported this process. I continue not to be supportive of this process. I believe this is a building that should remain as a town asset and owned by the town, not given away, which effectively it would be for, or would just be given away really for, on the pretense that it's actually restored. I believe the council should then look to restore it if we're just looking to go down that path. I'm still that mindset, and therefore I won't be supporting advertising this to the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gangel. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Hamilton?
I think everyone knows I love historical buildings and I love the history of the town. I find it appalling when I see historical buildings falling into disrepair. I find it appalling to see demolition by neglect. It's happening all over Australia. I think in WA there really should be some type of mechanism where there is better funding for restoration of historical buildings, even if it was just a percentage of revenue collected by the state that then goes back into restoration of historical buildings. There should be some mechanism in this state to preserve what little heritage is left. Unfortunately, there's not much. Even the heritage grants that are provided are minimal compared to the cost of restoring some of these buildings. And, you know, Councillor Ganchel has mentioned a certain amount that was in the grant, but that was still only a small amount of the total required to restore this building and the residents to its full glory. I have spoken to owners of historical properties that take great love and pride in restoring their properties to the nth degree. I have spoken to commercial entities that have purchased historical buildings and restored them, and they are open to the public to use in many ways. There are multiple ways of actually retaining heritage. It's not just about being in public ownership. In fact, a lot of those buildings that are in public ownership are neglected. So to look down your nose at commercial bodies and private owners who put their hand in their pocket and actually restore these buildings, I say congratulations, thank you very much, because the state is not coming to the party, and it should be coming to the party in this area, and they're not. So here we are, a local government with a small rate base and a property that requires significant work. And I know that around this table we were all devastated with the tender responses. We all didn't know what direction to take at that point in time other than to reject those tenders because they were so significantly higher than the budget. There's no getting around that. We are here to make hard decisions. This is not an easy decision. It would be lovely. It would be absolutely lovely to actually be able to, rip the money out of thin air and spend it on that property. But we don't have that luxury. What we have are a number of ageing assets around the town that we have to consider how we're going to manage a significant number of ageing assets. So I would encourage councillors to support the recommendation to advertise.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Quinton, do you wish to speak again?
No, thank you.
Okay, so we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Wilson, Quinton, Barty, Hamilton, McWilliam and McLennan, and against is Councillor Gangel, so that is carried. 12.4, this is the draft policy for the purchase and placement of memorials and celebration trees. Any questions to start with? Councillor Gangel first and Councillor Quinton.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Worship. Can I ask the officers, I'm just wanting to know, is the seat at full cost recovery?
Mayor, thank you for the question, Councillor. The seat is at full cost recovery.
Okay, thank you. Then can I ask, if the seat is at full cost recovery, why then is the trees not at full cost recovery?
Through the Mayor again, thank you, Councillor, for the question. In the report, we've put forward 3 different options that cost could look at for the trees. In terms of the proposal that's being put forward, there's no net increase in expenditure from accepting this particular policy. What it's proposing to do is to use existing funds that are funding the tree program, and the cost of the administration cost of running this policy is then provided by the applicant.
Does that make sense, Councillor Gangel?
Yes, but the tree though is not at full cost recovery to the applicant. They're just getting the administration fees.
Through the Mayor, correct.
So there's no additional tree being purchased, it's already a tree that the town was
As
buying.
business as usual, 7 to 8%, yes, yeah.
Okay, Councillor Quinton's question.
I move the motion.
Just see, any other questions first? Okay, great. So Councillor Quinton has moved, seconded Councillor Wilson. Is there anybody against? Do you wish to speak to the motion, Councillor Quinton?
Yes, I do. Thank you so much. What a wonderful policy. I think, and as Carol Seidel, a wonderful member of our community, pointed out, that there are many families that want to memorialise a passing of a loved one, the birth of a baby, a marriage, wonderful things that we can tie people intrinsically to their community through infrastructure, and not just a seat but a tree that will be there for 30 or 40 years, 50, 60 maybe, depending on the trees. How long does a tree last these days?
In the town, 9 months?
Hundreds, 600 years down in the south, but we're chopping them down, never mind. So I think this is a beautiful policy. I think this is the kind of thing that we should be doing to bring our community, tie them to a tree particularly. Imagine if we were able to say to one of our children, I planted this the day you were born and this tree has grown with you as you have grown as well, and that child will continue to go back there. I do want to tell a little bit of a story. When my brother Justin died 14 years ago, we went down to the riverbanks of the Chapman Valley in Geraldton, and we asked the City of Geraldton if we could plant some trees down on the riverbank of the Chapman Valley, because his body was in Perth and his children lived in Geraldton, and that was the space that they could go to think about their dad. And I think that is a beautiful sentiment to give people. So I love this policy. I think it is something that I hope we will advertise widely, and that we will get a lot of take up with. So I encourage everyone to support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Quinton. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to thank through you the staff for having taken on board the discussion during the briefings and workshops and putting considerable effort into reshaping and redrafting the policy that's before us now for consideration. I think it's a vast improvement on what came to us originally, and I commend the motion to Council.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson, and thank you, staff, for that as well. Councillor Ganjo?
Thank you, Worship. Now, Councillor Quinton would be surprised to know I don't actually disagree with the policy. What I actually have issue with is that we're not going for full cost recovery for the trees. So the seat we are going for full cost recovery. I sat through at the beginning of this meeting and heard a substantial debate about how tight, and Councillor Hamilton mentioned it again in the previous report, how tight our budget is and how we literally have no money to spare. But in this instance, we're not actually seeing how we can ensure what we are delivering for our community is at full cost recovery for our community. So therefore, ensuring that we're getting more money coming in for what we're putting out. That is purely and simply what my position is. I think if we're going for full cost recovery for the seat, then I think it's only fair on the ratepayers that we also have full cost recovery for the tree as well. And that way we're able to get a little bit more money in and make sure that we have a balanced budget. That's purely and simply what I'm saying. Other than that, I actually quite like the policy.
Thank you, Councillor Ganjo. Can I just clarify with the staff? My understanding of the difference is that the trees are trees that we would ordinarily be planting, so we're not spending more as a town, whereas the seats would be something that we ordinarily would not have in our budget. It's an additional piece of infrastructure, and that is why the full cost recovery is proposed for them. Would that be correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Questions?
Yes, sorry, Worship. So that's of the understanding that it's business as usual approach, but I don't understand why then. Can I ask stuff? Why then, when we're looking to actually not do business as normal, why then would we not look where we can actually get more money in to then assist us further in the budget? So would not getting actually the cost of the tree itself, fantastic initiative to have somebody plant a tree for a loved one, why then would the town not look at ensuring that that is actually assisted to help us pay for the tree in its totality, regardless of whether or not we're going to purchase it or not?
I guess that's an option for Councillor Ganjo, and if you can
Thank
convince your fellow councillors that that's what they want to include in the policy, then that can be accommodated.
Fat chance, I think.
Okay, so councillors, let's just get back on track. So is there anybody else who'd like to speak to this motion? Councillor Quinton, did you wish to speak again?
No, thank you.
Okay, so we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Wilson, Quinton, Barty, Hamilton, McWilliam and McLennan, and against is Councillor Ganjo, so that is carried. 12.6, this is the road closure for portions of Extension Road and West Road in Bassendean. Are there questions to begin with? Councillor Quinton and then Councillor Ganjo. I'd just like to bring everyone's attention as well. We did receive an email earlier today from Mr. Vincent Siciliano on this item, so I think you've all either received a copy or got the hard copy, and basically his position was requesting council not to support the officer recommendation. Sorry to cut you off, Councillor Quinton.
That is okay, because I am just looking for something. The section of the Local Government Act that allows us to purchase land from the Crown at a certain percentage, is that section 152? Or is that another section where we can then sell the land at the full cost? Is that a different section or is that the same section?
Through you, Madam Mayor, Section 152 is a section of the Planning and Development Act which allows the Planning Commission to impose a condition requiring the ceding of land for a public purpose such as public open space. It's
Okay.
not relevant to
Different,
this matter.
different section then. So there is a section, and I don't know what it is, so I'm hoping that you will be able to tell me, where we can purchase land from the Crown, from the state government, at a fraction of the cost, and then we are able to sell that land, and we can use the proceeds, but we have to use it for a specific project, which is exactly what we did with Sandy Beach. Correct?
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes, somewhat. The 5% or fraction is not embedded in any legislation. It was an informal working policy of the land section of the Department of Lands for some time. That policy, as I understand it, has been suspended. And it's simply a discretionary decision for the Minister as to how much a local government needs to pay for land. Again, this is a road closure under the Land Administration Act, and July.
And the section that Councillor Quinton's referring to, my understanding was anyway that was for the purposes of community benefit if the town was acquiring the land at the 5%.
That's correct, Madam Mayor. The Minister typically only allowed the 5% acquisition where the windfall for the local government, that is the revenue derived, would have been spent on a specific community purpose. So, as the Councillor refers to, Sandy Beach project, the town acquired 2 lots that were redundant portions of land that were previously provided as open space, one on Chapman Street and one on Laws Street. The Minister allowed the town to purchase that at 5%. The town sold it at market rates, with the proceeds of those sales being directed to the Sandy Beach project.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Hamilton.
Yes. I do question the end result of the recommendation in that clearly there's a process here where we're being asked to relinquish management order over that road reserve to the state government, so the state government could then potentially on-sell that land. Is that correct?
Through Madam Mayor, yes, that's correct.
Right. So, and clearly through the report, Hawaiian are the body who might be interested in purchasing that land. Is that correct?
Through Madam Mayor, yes, they are the current shopping centre operators, and they own the site that creates the demand for the car parking, with that car parking already located in the road reserve.
So my question is, originally the administration were seeking Hawaiian to enter into a licence agreement to continue using those bays, and licence agreements seem to be an established practice where government agencies of all different levels can lease out bays to private companies. So I question why that process cannot proceed rather than the process that's been put forward in this item, or at least negotiation of that process.
Through Madam Mayor, I'll clarify one of the comments Councillor Hamilton made. The town staff did not propose a licence. Town staff simply suggested that was one of the options available. The other option clearly being a road closure as identified in the report. The issue that brings this to council, and the issue that makes this in fact necessary, is the town's previous handling of the JDAT matter for the shopping centre. That has occurred years ago, back in 2013. This action now is simply to resolve that issue that was caused then.
So if a licence was one option, I question why we can't explore that option further. Is there potential to do that?
Through Madam Mayor, there is the potential to explore the licence. The reason town staff favour the closure is because it's a permanent solution to a problem that will occur in perpetuity. The JDAP approval runs in perpetuity. It's not a time limited approval. So staff consider it appropriate to have a similarly permanent solution. It is open to council, however, to ask the CEO to pursue a licence. However, that could be a much more costly process in terms of seeking legal assistance in preparing the licence documentation.
As we do with all our licences and leases that we've got around the town. Thank you, sir.
So, Mr Gibson, you're probably aware there's been a number of emails that have come in from members of the community that this particular item has raised some concerns with. I was just wondering if you could clarify the process for this coming to council and what's initiated it. One of the concerns that has come up is there's a perception that Hawaiian has been the instigator of this particular proposal, and my understanding is that it is the town staff going through and tidying up, as you say, the handling of the JDAP application from many years ago that has these outstanding matters to address.
Quite correct, Madam Mayor. This has been a town-led response. It was fairly obvious that a number over 100 car parking bays associated with the Hawaiian site were actually located in the road reserve. Town staff current town staff identified that and sought to rectify it. This is not a Hawaiian-led action, although Hawaiian are comfortable in the way it's proceeded up until now, but it is town instigated.
Thank you. Councillor McWilliam?
Just in terms of, this is 12 years old, at least 12 years old in making, for the JDAC was that many years ago, is that correct?
Not quite.
Not quite, 12 years ago?
Approximately 8.
8 years ago, okay. So certainly precedes this council, as a complement of councillors, etc.
And staff.
And staff, indeed. As we're all aware, we're undertaking a town centre master plan consultation with the community, and there's little doubt in my mind, and I'm sure it's in my colleagues' minds, that the swathe of emails that have come through questioning the timing of this, and in fact requesting what I would suggest is a possible delay, but a positive one, that we actually put off moving this forward for a little bit longer until the town centre master plan is completed in consultation with the community. And the reason that I'm asking if this is feasible and doable is that this is creating a situation where people are reacting to this as maybe being part of the town centre master plan. So it's perception, as they say in the classics, is everything. So rather than go down a path where people are perceiving and talking to each other and broadening that perception that this is somehow part of the town centre master plan.
So Councillor McWilliam, just in response to your question, you're probably aware that I've circulated an alternative that does not support the officer recommendation and seeks to defer it. And I've consulted with the staff on that earlier today, and there's no objection from the staff for it being delayed. Councillor Hamilton first, and then Councillor Wilson.
Just a little question, because I note that some of the emails, actually many of the emails that I've received, and I believe that all councillors have received a lot of these emails as well. Some have included all of us and some have been to us individually. So there's been some commentary about, I didn't see the advertisement for this. I'm sorry I've missed the consultation, but. So I would ask the CEO to perhaps take on board those comments. And I did note one gentleman, I can't remember which gentleman it was, said something about the potential of creating a register so that all consultations, those people who register, can get an email inviting them to consult on that. And that, I was very interested in that particular proposal.
So I think, Councillor Hamilton, that is what has tended to occur. Maybe in this particular instance it didn't, because we do have the database of emails that I know when we had Deanie Carbon on staff, she would send out the regular email. So I'm not sure why it didn't happen in this instance, but I know it's something that the town has intended to do.
So I have a subsequent question to that. In that this particular item didn't come to council for approval for advertising. So I'm just curious about the process there, because there's so many other things that come to council for approval to be advertised. So I'm wondering why this one didn't.
Mr Gibson, are you able to comment on that?
Through you, Madam Mayor, it wasn't required under the legislation, but if council would prefer to see these things in future before they're advertised, we're certainly able to arrange that, either by a full council meeting or through the CEO board.
And I think that you did bring it to council's attention through the bulletin several months ago. Yeah. Councillor Wilson's question.
Thank you, Worship. Like other councillors, I've received quite a lot of correspondence about this. Just for the record though, could staff please explain who actually owns the land and what the difference is between ownership of the land and a management order for the land?
Through you, Madam Mayor. It is Crown land, therefore it's broadly covered. It's the custodian from an ownership point of view is the state. Given that it's not a regional road like Lord Street, sorry, not Law Street, Guildford Road. It's under the care and control of the town. That is, having the care and control on the maintenance obligation is different to owning the site in fee simple, such as the way the town owns Surrey Street. So there is a difference between fee simple ownership and care and control of a reserve.
Thank you. Did you have another question, Councillor Hamilton?
No, I was going to second you when you...
Okay, so councillors, I have a alternative motion to the officer recommendation. That is that Council 1 does not authorise a request being made to the Minister for Lands pursuant of Section 58 of the Land Administration Act 1997 for the permanent closure of portions of Extension Road and West Road Reserve as identified by hatching on the location plan attached to this report to enable the land to be amalgamated into Lot 2 West Road Bassendean. And 2, defers any further consideration of this matter until after the completion of the Town Centre Master Plan. So Councillor Hamilton has seconded that. Is there anybody against? So that is carried unanimously. Moving on to 12.10, this is the fees for Wind in the Willows Early Education Centre for the coming financial year. Any questions? If there are no questions, is there a mover for the officer recommendation? Councillor Wilson's moved. A seconder, Councillor McWilliam. Is there anybody against? That's carried. Item 12.11 is the waiver of rates for Lot 304 Kenny Street. Any questions to begin with? Excuse my voice tonight, everybody. I'm struggling a bit. Is there a mover for the officer recommendation? Okay, I'll move the officer recommendation, seconded by Councillor Barty. Is there anybody against? That's carried. Item 12.12, the Town of Bassendean Local Government Ordinary Election for 2021. Is there a mover for the officer recommendation? Councillor McWilliam has moved, seconded. Councillor Barty. Anybody against? That's carried unanimously. 12.13, so our CEO has declared an interest in this item. It's the standards for CEO recruitment, performance and termination policy. Are there any questions on this item? Yes, Councillor Hamilton.
I proposed an amendment or an alternative, amendment to this, but I did want to ask a question. The training that's in the policy that requires
policy.
Yep, that requires the new policy, and it's in the old policy, and it's currently in this draft new policy. However, there's been commentary that it could be removed. Now, my question is that the training requires councillors to have done the CEO training at Walga before they can participate in performance reviews. And given we're such a small council coming up to that process, I'm asking the staff if they're
So maybe
if there's perceived problems in removing that particular clause, given it's not legislatively required.
Through Madam Mayor, it is certainly an option for council to remove that particular clause from the proposed policy. It's not a requirement within the standard. It has been a procedure put within the town's proposed policy, and it certainly can be removed if that's council's decision.
Okay.
Thank you.
And can I ask, I don't believe that there was any staff concerns with the other minor, what I consider to be minor amendments in my alternative.
Through Madam Mayor, no, I don't believe there was.
So this was just adding in that there were 2 or more candidates?
Yes.
Yep. Can I just ask you, Councillor Hamilton, so I understand your reason for wanting to remove the requirement for the training, given that in our current situation that would limit the number of councillors who are able to participate to 3, which is clearly inadequate. In your proposal, you're moving this amendment, I assume. I'd be happy to second it, but I'd be very keen for us to not remove the reference to training completely. I would be comfortable with it saying encouraged to attend, so that we retain the importance of training in the policy.
I'm happy with that.
Okay, so
Because I actually agree that training is important. However, in this instance, I think a small council, the CEO requires full input from all of us.
So Amy, are you
So
comfortable?
instead of deleting point G, we're just changing the word
Yep,
required to encourage to attend.
that's correct. Okay, so Councillor Hamilton's moved, I've seconded. Is there anybody against? Okay, so that is carried unanimously. 12.14 is the quarterly report. Councillor Hamilton, did you have a question on this?
I have a few. Just give me a minute, thank you.
Any other councillors have questions?
Item C421.
What's that in reference to, Councillor?
That is on page C421. Sorry, I'm trying to find.
Page 6 of 26 in the quarterly report.
Yep.
Provide a welcome pack to all
Welcome
new households.
packs. Now, it says that we're on track there, but my understanding is the welcome packs ceased to be produced during the COVID period when COVID first hit, and I don't believe that I've seen any since then. So can I ask a timeline on that?
Certainly, by the end of this quarter, we'll have a revised welcome pack. We're just reviewing it at the moment. Some of the material in the welcome pack was quite dated.
So can councillors have access to that
Absolutely.
material before it becomes the gold standard?
Absolutely.
Okay. C511, which is also on the same page. We've got review of the Relax program, and that was also a question that I sent through to Mr. White this afternoon in the payment figures. Given, that we've been saying we're going to review that for a while, I'm beginning to think that it's possibly becoming a little bit important, especially if we're looking at revamping some of our programs, and noting the visit that we made to Victoria Park, where there's so many, there's such a variety of programs provided so cheaply. My question to staff is, can they find out how Vic Park do that? Because it seems very expensive how we're providing and the costs that are involved.
Certainly. There's
So
a couple
I'd
of comments
love
I'd
to know how Vic Park
like
do
to
that.
make, Councillor Hamilton. As you know, we're about to start consultation on a public health plan with the community. So finding out what the aspirations are of our community in terms of health and well-being, and also any issues that we need to address. So we've actually scheduled in a review of the Relax program next financial year, and it could potentially be a revamped program, but under the public, aligned to the public health plan. We're also forging a relationship with Connect Vic Park in terms of looking at the way they conduct their business model.
Really interested in that. And I also would suggest to the administration that the Relax program is not just about health. There are cultural and artistic endeavours as well that should be pursued.
Another question, Councillor Hamilton?
Oh, yes.
Are they questions you need to ask now, or
Yeah.
can we ask the staff at another time?
I could ask the staff at a later time. I'll actually cut it down to C631. C631, which is on page 8 at the top, indicates that we're looking at a workforce plan for the next 4 years. Sequencing, I would have thought a long-term financial plan comes first before you do a 4-year workforce plan.
Yeah, there's a number of planning artefacts that we're still to develop and align. A draft workforce plan has been developed and will be provided to councillors shortly. It's just going through a review process, and it'll be subject to a workshop on the 8th of June.
Okay, great. N414, which is on page 11, develop, oh no, that's the wrong one. Wrong one, move on.
maybe one more, Councillor Hamilton?
One more. I did mention last week CH311, which is one of the very last ones. Sorry. Review Council's Public Arts Framework, and it's not started yet, so I would suggest, as I always do about this one, we don't need a framework, we don't need a plan, we actually need some art. And I think that you could put a pin anywhere in the map and be able to put some art. So that will be my hobby horse again and again, as John has his hobby horse about weeds. Mine is
Councillor Hamilton, would you like to move the officer recommendation?
No, because there's also 2 resolutions.
Okay, which resolutions do you want deleted?
Okay, the first one is at the top of the page, ROC 1859846. This is regarding 1 River Street, and I'm curious, because there are things to come back to us, I'm curious about whether that should be deleted now or not, and it's a question more than actually saying it shouldn't be deleted.
That looks like it's a resolution from
Yes, I was looking at the date.
So there's been more recent resolutions, so this will be outdated.
Yeah, that's why I was curious about it. It seemed like the most recent one, but it's not, and I'm not sure. So I thought I'd ask.
Is that correct?
Madam Mayor, yes, that's correct. We can see from the prefixes from 2018, the council will recall this coming to council at least twice in the last 12 months.
Thank you for that.
Okay, and one more, which is the next page, ROC 20/72631, Mr. Ma. This one says that it's for deletion, but it talks about council resolution to reinstate the South Jetty. So I'm wondering how we can delete this when we have a resolution in there about reinstating the South Jetty.
Through there, I was just, sorry, I missed the number, but I was assuming this was related to reserve.
Yes.
So the reason why it was for deletion was because there's been a recent council or a subsequent council resolution that says control the concept plan and so forth, which would then guide the future for Point Reserve.
Councillor Quintin?
Well, while we're here, I'll throw my hat in the ring. ROC 69640 shade sales at the Bassendean skate park.
Dave Kelly funded those.
Dave Kelly has apparently funded those as part of the 2021 state election. Thank you so much, Dave Kelly. It's been also brought to my attention, though, that other funding election commitments, the funding actually hasn't landed in the bank accounts of any of those election commitments. Have we received the funding for the skate park yet?
Through Madam Mayor, I don't know.
Can we keep that in until we receive the funding, so that it's a reminder to the staff to remind Dave Kelly to make sure he pays us, please?
Okay, so we've got an officer recommend.
ROC 19 69640.
So